Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. Renowned Icelandic poet and author Andri Magnason is chasing something elusive. As the glacial ice of his homeland melts, he constructs a cinematic time capsule to hold on to this moment and to send it into the future before everything he loves slips away. Using his own collected archives, his grandparents' photographs and films, as well as traditional songs and folktales, Andri interlaces his family's story with that of the land around him. Just a gorgeous film to look at, and there's much here to contemplate, truly think about, and ask yourself, what can I do to do something about what is happening? We're joined today by the Oscar-nominated director of Fire of Love, joining us today to talk about her latest work, Time and Water, Sara Dosa. Sara, welcome back to Cinemophile.
Oh, thank you so much, Mike. It's such an honor to be here.
Sara, this, as I mentioned to you before we get started, this feels like a dialogue with Fire of Love in some manner of speaking. People who love the planet have a profound understanding of our connection to it. That's what I feel like some part of the connection is. How did you come upon Andri Magnason, and what prompted this to become what we know as Time and Water?
Well, thank you so much for that very kind observation. I actually first met Andri many years ago, over a decade ago, when I was making a film entitled The Seer The Unseen, which is another environmental story set in Iceland. Everyone told me, you must meet Andri. He's one of the leaders of the environmental movement. He's a celebrated writer, public intellectual. He was also enlisted to run for president in Iceland. So I'll just say he wore many hats, and he was kind of the go-to stop for me. Once I met him, I quickly saw why. Andri has this incredible capability to take these overwhelming, kind of massive concepts and translate them into something that feels human, accessible, and emotional. And that's something that is so key, especially in communicating a story about the climate crisis. So I'll just say I met him back then, but it wasn't until 2019 when an article came out entitled "How Do You Say Goodbye to a Glacier?" that he had written in The Guardian that I knew I wanted to make this film. I just thought that question in particular was such a profound and almost surreal question that articulated this feeling that so many people have right now of like, how do we make sense of these radical changes in our everyday life that the climate crisis is bringing? After many conversations, it was a really wonderful kind of journey into making this film together.
Okay, so you met him, and what was your first impression of him?
I thought Andri was great. He's very charismatic. He's very fun. He's very funny. And that was something that, yeah, when you're talking about stories that have this very serious underpinning, like the climate crisis, to have someone who is also playful and joyful and funny, it's such an important thing in a storyteller. So I'll just say I immediately really liked him, and he struck me as someone with whom I would like to collaborate. I met him many, many years ago when he just consulted on Seer The Unseen, but he always stuck in my mind as someone whose work was inspiring. And so the fact that we ended up collaborating on this film, and it's now meeting the world. This is the eve of our theatrical release. It just means such a great deal to me to get to work with someone whose writing has inspired a lot in me through the years.
Well, and also you had the great fortune of him having documented
Yes.
so much of, and if I'm not, it's going back a little ways, but Fire of Love, you also had sort of that same set of circumstances. The couple that are featured in the film had been documenting their work. So, wow. Right.
Yes. I feel very, very lucky. Yeah, for both of them, the crafts and Fire of Love, the volcanologists at the heart of that film. They were incredible cinematographers who were so kind of obsessed with capturing the enormity, the spectacle, the power of the volcanoes that they loved so dearly. And Andri, too, for him, what began is he wanted to film everything that he loved in his life, keenly aware of like the ticking clock of human mortality. And specifically with his grandparents, he didn't want to lose a generation's stories that spoke of an Iceland before his own. So I'll just say, like, getting to work with two sets of protagonists in two different films, but both with this acute awareness of the fragility as well as the transcendent power of time as encoded through film was such an incredible gift for myself and my team to work with, because you can feel that longing to capture time, both with the crafts and with Andri. Like, they're both like in love with the world that they see possibly falling away. For the crafts, they knew that they were going to die. They thought if they lived the life that they wanted to live, with volcanoes, that they would die. Whereas Andri, he's watching his beloved elders transform in their elder years and tragically pass away. Something so many we all kind of know, and at once it still somehow seems unthinkable. But then for that to happen to a glacier as well, I'll just say getting to work with archives in this way was really meaningful to us. And I'm profoundly grateful that Andri was able to capture this, and of course the crafts as well.
And that word profoundly and profound, that's a word that kept coming back to me, that this is an experience. I mean, the crafts with Fire of Love, it was, they were doing what you just described, but they had this kind of sense of their fate was probably going to end the way that it did. Andri, it feels like he's waving a red flag. He's doing everything he can so that that fate that is inevitable, it feels inevitable, but it's certainly something that we can see happening in real time. He does anyway, is something that we can avoid. Now, I mean, we may not be able to avoid a lot of this. I think the die is cast for a lot of what is going to happen to the planet right now as we speak. But there is something I feel, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that we can head off the worst possible scenario that's still in front of us.
I think that's absolutely fair, and that's a beautiful formulation. Thank you for putting it like that. Yes, the crafts did know their fate, but I think you're absolutely right. There's this feeling right now that we're entering an apocalyptic world, but I really believe that these kind of stories of dystopia, while they do speak to the horror that so many people are feeling and living through every day with the climate crisis, there still is a moment, and that is something that we really try to impart in the film. At the very end, Andri says that he hopes that, that this time capsule or this film is a portal to a time when glaciers are still alive, held open so they can continue to be. And for us, that really means like glaciers are still alive right here. Like you, the audience, the quote unquote recipients of this speculative time capsule, you can feel the life force. They are still alive. And by experiencing that kind of sentience of the ice, hopefully it can inspire a feeling of connectivity and care for these landscapes that can impact our own actions. But we do need to do things immediately. There is so much that is already lost and will continue to be lost, but there's always something to be done. So whatever we can do to pressure our, politicians or change our economic behaviors. I could go on and on and on. This isn't an explicitly advocacy film. There's no prescription at the end. There's no website or anything like that. There's no direct kind of policy prescription that the film makes. But we really hope that the emotions within the film can cause people to find their own motivation to make changes in their own life if it speaks to them in that way.
Well, I don't know how you could avoid not having this conversation with someone else or with yourself after watching this film. And one of the things that's in that monument that we see at the end of the film, it says, we know it's happening. We're not pretending this is not something that is speculative. We know that these glaciers are on a path for their demise. And we are hoping that you are reading this at a time when you headed off the worst of this, basically, that you took action. And that's, again, it's a very, very, very powerful film because it humanizes the people who are on the front lines of this. gives us something to, they're experts, they're motivated, they're all the things that you would, of the best of human, the best of us. And they're understanding, they're looking at this kind of abyss, and they're hoping that we will take action to stop it from happening. And I've had many people on the program talk about with environmentally oriented films, and I keep coming back to this, and it's that the indigenous people are the ones who are going to save us. We have done everything we can to marginalize them, eliminate them, but they hold the keys to restoring the planet to some measure of balance. And if we choose to listen to them, and they're natives. I mean, they're indigenous. So
Yeah, yeah, that's a really powerful and incredible point. The concept of indigeneity in Iceland is quite complex because they're the first humans to live there. But it's not a term that many Icelanders embrace themselves. But they were the first humans. They've lived on this volcanic island since the year 874. There have been people who kind of passed through there before that, but the real settlement happened about 1,200 years ago. And that deep knowledge of the land courses through until today. I think it's those deep relationships with the land that so many people around the world, especially indigenous communities, to your point, possess, that I think you're totally right, can help us to think our way out of this crisis. I have a friend who comes from a First Nation community in Canada, and he was telling me the other week about how for him, the apocalypse has already happened. The genocide of his people has happened and is ongoing. Finding ways to think through another round of the impossible can generate all kinds of creative solutions. Tragically, they come from tremendous bloodshed and violence and injustice. And yet, looking to people who have survived the unthinkable can act as such an inspiring way to come together as humans to recenter the relationships we have with nature, which so many indigenous communities have known and live and see themselves as part of a greater kinship entangled within nature. I really believe it's that kind of thinking that is so potent and necessary right now.
just want to quickly remind our listeners we're speaking with Sara Dosa. She is the director of this incredible documentary film that I hope that you will run out and see, because it's going to be in theaters beginning on June 5th. It'll be here in Los Angeles at the Laemmle Royal. It's called Time and Water. And to the point about the indigenous communities around the world, we and I'm European by descent. The Euro conquest, the colonization of so many of these indigenous people is in some way, it isn't that long ago that they were managing the planet, managing their land that they lived on. So their knowledge is still with us. The knowledge of how to cultivate and to renew and all the rest of it is still here, as it is in Iceland, as it is around the world, Africa, South America, the Polynesian, the Pacific Islanders. So they're still here with us. I just think that does provide some measure of hope moving forward.
I think you're absolutely right. As we were researching the film, we were coming across these beautiful and deeply meaningful stories around the world of glaciers being ancestors. In Greenland, I was actually working in Greenland on another film, and we were working with a community, an indigenous community in Greenland on that project, and they were talking about this one specific glacier as an uncle. And I do think that finding kinship with nature, whether you're come from an indigenous heritage or not, can reconceptualize a gaze towards nature, where when you feel nature is alive, it's almost as an act of rebellion against exploiting it. If you see a rock as possessing a life force, as holding a memory, which is actually geologically true, and it's something that is found in many indigenous kind of life worlds and ways of thinking, then you treat it differently. The film I made where I first met Andri, called The Seer the Unseen, it's about an Icelandic woman who's in communication with spirits of nature in Iceland. And she says the way you see the land determines your relationship to the land. So if you see a glacier as possessing life force, even though it's technically an abiotic landscape, which is something that's really important to us to do in Time and Water, kind of through our use of cinematography as well as sound design, then you're going to act differently towards the glacier if you just think it's like a block of frozen water somewhere in a distant mountain. So it's these kinds of stories that to me are deeply inspiring, and I think can be a gesture towards repair at a moment when we need so much to stave off kind of the worst from happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And just in the last minute or so I have with you, I think there's a distinction that I grew up with and has more recently in my life been brought to my attention. And that is indigenous people tend to look at land as the giver of food and shelter. We, and I'm gonna say me, I mean, this is what the culture I grew up in, believe in land ownership. And this is something that's completely antithetical to, as far as I know, most indigenous peoples of the world. The idea of owning land, there are pluses and minuses. I'm not going to argue that it's completely crazy, but at the same time, it's this idea of the relationship to the land is that you don't own it. You cultivate it and you make it work for you. It's vastly different than the society I grew up in.
Yeah, I feel like people who are raised in capitalist societies, you're raised with this idea of private property, of the sanctity of the individual, rather than kind of the entanglements in nature and the kind of rootedness within community. And I think that those are values that kind of historically have coursed through many Indigenous communities. They're by no means siloed just within Indigenous communities. And
Right.
of course, I know that so many people around the world. I believe culture is dynamic and
Yes.
people are always changing and evolving their way of thinking. But I really do think that there is something particular about kind of the view of nature that comes from, hundreds of years, generations within kind of a political economic system of capitalism and how that relates to our way of treating nature. So I think what you're saying it really speaks to me. I think one of the things about, the dynamism of culture and specifically the role of storytelling within it is that it can kind of widen our views. Everything is malleable, difficult. We have to interrogate ourselves and challenge ourselves to think differently. If it's not the kind of cosmology that we were raised with,
Right.
it's absolutely possible. And so I'm really grateful to be met with people like Andri, whose kind of work can do that kind of work, that can inspire a way of thinking, that can expand at least my own view, and hopefully audiences who see the film will feel this way too, to kind of have a different relationship with nature that can feel kind of like a hand outreached, in kinship with our natural world.
Well, time and water is profoundly human in the sense of the people's connection to each other. As we see the passing of generations, which Andre documents his own family, how that plays into it. There's just that, and the music, by the way, the sound you mentioned, the sound design. It all plays together in just a magnificent documentary film. What can I tell you? People see this film, Time and Water. It couldn't be more timely. We have to work with the environment, not conquer it. It's fundamentally what this is about. Not the conquest of our planet. It is working together to make it something that we can live and thrive on. So thank you. Again, the film is called Time and Water. And I'm sure that the reactions you're getting in your own Q&As around as you take this film from festival to now the theatrical realm will be heartwarming and hopefully inspiring for everyone, for you and for everyone in that theater. So thank you so very much, Sara Dosa, for your time and for this work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm so touched by your incredibly thoughtful reactions and for this conversation. So it really means a lot to me.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.